Charlotte hadn't given it much thought when Liam, her husband, informed her that his closest buddy Nathan would be spending a few weeks with them. After all, Liam had known Nathan since college, so he was like family. However, something about him felt different when he got there. Nathan had always been endearing, but his demeanor had taken on a new assurance. The fragility underlying his easy grin spoke to Charlotte's innermost feelings because he had just gone through a messy breakup. Their contacts were informal at first. He would laugh with her over one of Liam's cheesy jokes or assist her with groceries. However, as the days went by, Charlotte became aware of how his eyes lingered on her for a bit too long, or how his voice grew softer when they were by themselves. One evening, Charlotte and Nathan were in the living room with a bottle of wine between them after Liam had gone to bed early due to a headache. The warmth of the crackling fire on the hearth filled the quiet. Charlotte poured him another glass and remarked, "You've been quiet tonight." With a small smile, Nathan stared at the flames. "I just have a lot on my mind. Do you want to discuss it?" Swirling the wine in his glass, he paused. "Really, it's nothing. Just pondering what might have been." Charlotte's interest pushed her to bend her head. "With your former partner?" He looked into her eyes and said, "Partially, but other things too." Her spine tingled at the intensity of his stare. She started to reply, but the words stuck in her throat. "Charlotte," he uttered in a tremulous voice. "May I tell you the truth?" With her heart pounding, she nodded. "Obviously." With his elbows resting on his knees, Nathan leaned forward. "I've realized how much I've been missing since I've been here and seen you. In my life, not simply in my relationship." The distance between them appeared to close, and her breath caught Nathan. His hand touched hers as he extended it. Although the contact was fleeting, it gave her a shock and sparked an emotion she hadn't experienced in years. He said, "I know this is wrong, but my feelings are uncontrollable." Confusion, longing, and guilt swirled in Charlotte's mind. She continued in a shaky voice, "Liam is your best friend." "I understand," Nathan responded, maintaining a steady gaze. "Furthermore, I would never harm him in any way. Whatever this is between us, though, it's real, isn't it?" Although she didn't respond, the way her fingers coiled around his said a lot. As Nathan moved closer and put his palm on her cheek, the tension in the room became intolerable. With his breath warm against her skin, he whispered, "Tell me to stop." With her willpower failing, Charlotte closed her eyes. "I am unable to." A gentle, tentative kiss, as if to test the waters, came between his lips and hers. However, their reserve vanished as their passion grew and the kiss became deeper. As the firelight danced across their intertwined bodies, Nathan's hands moved to her waist and pulled her onto his lap. His voice was full with emotion as he said against her lips, "You're amazing." As his fingertips traced the curve of her back, she responded, "And you're impossible," gasping for air. The gentle brightness of dawn peeking through the drapes roused Charlotte. She turned to see Nathan still sleeping next to her, his arm over her waist, the weight of the night before pressing down on her. She gave herself over to the peaceful intimacy of the moment and the warmth of his presence for a minute. She was startled back to reality, though, by the sound of the shower running upstairs. Liam was awake. She slipped out of bed carefully, being cautious not to disturb Nathan, and panic struck. She hurriedly put on her clothes while trying to figure out how she would handle the day. She froze when she entered the kitchen and saw Liam seated at the table with a coffee mug in his hands. Even though he had a serene face, she could feel the acerbic gleam in his eyes. "Good morning," he murmured in a bland tone. She forced a grin and said, "Good morning." Liam sipped his coffee while maintaining eye contact with her. "Nathan is still asleep, right?" Charlotte's cheeks flushed as her heart halted. I believe so." He leaned back in his chair and put down his mug. He said, his voice eerily steady, "You know, he talks in his sleep." His words took hold, and her stomach fell. "I can, Liam." He silenced her by raising a hand. With a harsh tone, he said, "Save it. I am already aware." Nathan emerged in the doorway before she could reply, his face a puzzled, worried expression. "Liam, Liam said, jumping up suddenly. "I don't want to hear it. I had faith in you both, and you pay me back like this?" As Liam's remarks lingered between them, the tension in the kitchen increased. Charlotte felt as if the walls were closing in on her, while Nathan remained motionless in the doorway, his jaw clenched. Liam had never looked like this to her, his placid veneer barely masking the tempest that was building beneath it. I apologize, Liam, Charlotte stumbled, her voice shaking. It was not intended to occur. It's simply, what exactly is it? Liam cut in, his voice sharp as a blade. Just occurred? Isn't that what people say all the time? As if it were an accident. With his hands slightly up in a surrender position, Nathan stepped forward. I understand how this appears, Liam, but you don't get to explain, Liam yelled, raising his voice. You can't just stand there and pretend that you had no idea what you were doing. My best friend is supposed to be you. Nathan's face changed, showing a conflict between frustration and guilt. And I am. I was and always have been. However, he paused, then looked from Liam to Charlotte and back again. However, it wasn't about betraying you that occurred. There was more to it than that. As both men looked at Charlotte, Charlotte's tummy twisted. Her knees ached from the pressure of their stares, but she knew she had to speak up. She said, hardly raising her voice above a whisper, Liam, you must understand that I never intended to cause you any harm. This was not what I had anticipated happening, but, however, what? Liam clenched his hands and demanded. She inhaled deeply as tears welled up in her eyes. But for a long time, I felt so isolated. You've been aloof, preoccupied with your job and everything but us. Additionally, Nathan made me feel seen. I felt alive because of him. Liam's face contorted in pain and rage. So I'm to blame? His voice was trembling as he asked, You're holding me responsible for this? No, she shook her head hastily. I don't hold you responsible. I'm merely attempting to describe how I get here. I know it's not right, so I'm not saying it is. I can't claim, though, that I didn't experience something genuine. Nathan took a step forward and spoke in a steady but passionate tone. I didn't come here to mess with your marriage, Liam. I thought I could rely on you, so I came here in need of a place to stay. However, the more time I spent with Charlotte, the more I recognized her amazing qualities. I can't lie about how I feel, but I'm not attempting to defend anything. Liam's fury flared up again, and his eyes narrowed. You believe that makes it acceptable? You believe that you can wreck everything because of your feelings? Nathan did not recoil. No. However, I believe you should consider why she initially felt so alienated. This goes beyond what occurred the night before. It concerns what has long been absent. Liam ran a hand through his hair and shook his head, laughing bitterly. His voice was low as he continued. You're unbelievable, you two, pretending that this is a tragic love story rather than the treachery that it is. His motions were sudden as he turned towards the door. He murmured, I need some air, and reached for his coat. When I return, don't bother being here. The sound of the door slamming behind him reverberated throughout the house, and Charlotte's heart fell. She looked to Nathan, tears welling up in her eyes. Now what do we do? With a gentle touch on her arm, Nathan took a step closer. He said, We do this one step at a time. You're not alone in this, though, regardless of what occurs. As Charlotte attempted to make sense of what had happened, the hours flew by. Nathan remained by her side, acknowledging her need for privacy, but providing gentle support. The sun had already fallen when Liam got back, and the living room was covered in lengthy shadows. He came in silently, staring at the two of them with an unreadable expression. I gave what you said a lot of thought, Liam stated in a controlled tone. And you're correct. We haven't been getting along for a while. However, that does not justify your actions. Charlotte's throat constricted as she nodded. I understand, she muttered. I apologize as well. Liam's tone hardened as he turned to face Nathan. I'm not sure if I can ever forgive you for this. However, I require time to determine the next course of action, for everyone. Liam stopped, his back to them as he turned to go upstairs. And Nathan, you're crazy if you think you're going to stay here another night, he continued in a slightly resentful tone. Nathan looked directly into Charlotte's eyes, his face displaying a mixture of resolve and regret. I'll leave, he answered quietly, but it doesn't end here. As Charlotte watched him go, the consequences of their decisions weighed hard on her, and her heart bled. She had no idea what was ahead, but she was sure that nothing would ever be the same. Liam slammed the door behind him, and the silence in the living room was overwhelming. Charlotte sat on the couch, trying to take in what had happened, her hands shaking. On the other side of the room, Nathan stood tensely, his dark eyes fixed on her. "Charlotte," he whispered quietly as he moved in closer. "Are you all right?" Her heart thumping, she glanced up at him. "No," she said, her voice faltering. "How we got here is a mystery to me." With his hands lightly covering hers, Nathan knelt before her. "I can't leave you like this, even though I know I should go. Not after everything." She couldn't deny the draw she felt towards him in spite of the raging tempest of emotions inside her. His touch was grounded and warm. She gazed into his eyes, seeking solace, understanding, and perhaps even forgiveness. "Nathan," she muttered, her voice full of passion. "Now what?" Nathan paused, his eyes fixed on hers. His voice was firm and quiet as he questioned, "What do you want to happen?" Charlotte's pulse accelerated as she swallowed forcefully. "Honestly, I don't know," she said. "I just know that at the moment, I'd rather not be by myself." He gently touched her cheek with his hand. "You're not by yourself," he said. "You weren't." He leaned forward, their faces inches apart, and you could feel the tension between them. The weight of their decisions caused Charlotte's breath to catch and her mind to race. However, all worries about the repercussions vanished as soon as his lips touched hers. At first, the kiss was tentative and slow, as though they were exploring the limits of their relationship. However, their passion became stronger as it ignited, and the intensity of the moment caused their inhibition to crumble. She put her arms around Nathan's neck, and he slid his hands to her waist, drawing her in. "You're amazing," he said against her lips, his voice full of passion. She said, "And you're impossible," her voice faltering as her fingers got caught in his hair. Nathan got up and took her to the couch, effortlessly lifting her into his arms. As they gave in to the connection that had been simmering for days, the room was filled with the gentle warmth of the lamp, and the shadows danced across their intertwined bodies. The sound of a key turning in the front door stopped them both in their tracks as their passion peaked. When the door opened and Liam appeared in the doorway, his eyes wide with shock, Charlotte's heart stopped. There was silence for a minute. As Liam's gaze shifted between them, his look was a mix of amazement, hurt, and something else, something unexpected. The scene's weight hung heavily in the air. Finally, in a monotone voice, he added, "I forgot my phone." Obviously, I had interrupted. While Nathan stood with his palms slightly up in submission, Charlotte clambered to her feet and wrapped a blanket about herself. She started to say, "Liam," but he stopped her with a hand gesture. "Don't," Liam stated in a stern voice. "Avoid insulting me by attempting to clarify." However, Liam chose to enter and shut the door after himself. His eyes turned to Nathan, and a sour smirk curved his lips. "So this is the situation, isn't it?" Nathan's jaw tightened as he straightened. "It's not what it appears to be." "Oh," Liam said in a cold tone, "that's exactly what it looks like." Then he laughed dryly, which Charlotte found surprising. "I ought to be enraged right now. I am too. But what do you know? Perhaps we all need this." Charlotte's forehead furrowed in perplexity. "What are you discussing?" Liam took a step forward, his face softening slightly as he gazed at her. "Charlotte, you've been unhappy for a while. Now I see that. Perhaps I haven't noticed it. But perhaps we should quit acting if this is what it takes to wake me up." The atmosphere became charged with something neither of them could identify, and the tension in the room changed. Liam's demeanor was unreadable as his eyes darted between them. At last, he said calmly, "Nathan, you've been my best friend forever, and I despise you at the moment. I can't ignore what's going on here, though." Nathan scowled, clearly bewildered. "What do you say?" After taking a big breath, Liam spoke slowly and deliberately. "Maybe there's another way to handle this, I'm saying." As Liam moved closer and touched Charlotte's hand, her heart began to accelerate. "What are you saying?" Her question was hardly audible above a whisper. A glimmer of something bold appeared in Liam's eyes when they met hers. "Perhaps we should stop battling what is already taking place. Perhaps together we can see where this leads." As the three of them stood there, the weight of Liam's proposition looming large in the air, the room appeared to contract. Charlotte's heart thumped as she glanced between them, her thoughts whirling with potential outcomes. "Are you serious?" Nathan questioned in a disbelieving tone. Liam looked him in the eye evenly. "I'm not kidding." After a brief moment of hesitation, Charlotte moved forward and touched Liam's hand. She said, "I don't know if this is crazy, but maybe crazy is just what we need." Boundaries became hazy, and emotions clashed as the night went on, taking them into unknown terrain. It was a night that none of them would ever forget, raw, wild, and completely unexpected. The three of them sat in the silent living room as daylight came, the burden of the night before weighing heavily on them. Nothing was spoken, only a mutual recognition that everything had changed. One thing was clear as they faced the day ahead. The decisions they had taken would have an impact on their lives in ways they had not yet anticipated.